out somebody by the people that come to their funeral. What an eclectic bunch. I mean, really. It just shows how the wake of Jimmy Ray Johnson just affected so many people. I can't imagine too many of you were affected more than I was, but I know every testimony I hear runs deep. It just runs deep, very deep. And we're all here for us today. Jimmy's fine. You know, some people, I mean, we all need to process our mortality. That's where it's at. And some people believe the end is the end, and I don't, and Jimmy didn't either. And so we'll proceed from that perspective. He affected my life more than almost anybody else because I was just out on the road 200 days a year. They asked me to tell a little of this story. And I was introduced to Jimmy in a hotel room in Los Angeles. And I already had little 2-year-old twins, Jamie and Nellie, 2 years old. Jamie's here, he's 42 now. That affects your life. And we hated LA, and I was brought into this hotel room, and there was Jimmy just sitting on the bed eating something, watching TV. And I almost felt like we might have interrupted him, you know what I mean? And Jimmy could be wonderfully, you know, he's such a dichotomy of different influences, you know. There were just, you know, he could be really brash one second, and, you know, what gives you the idea to play guitar on this song? And then, by the way, did you hear that solo you took? Like, man, that's killer. And sit me down in his chair and start to rub my traps to the point where I could barely breathe. And hear that? You were great, you know what I mean? And a minute ago, he was just telling me, you know. He could be like that, and he sort of started like that. He goes, well, play me something. And I sat down and I played him a song. And he just, well, play me something I don't like. And he said, I want you down in Muscle Shoals. Can I fly you down there? And we flew down here, and he just put out the red carpet for me. Took me right to George's. Took me over to the studio the next morning, and he put a little band together. It was Roger Hawkins and David Hood, and Randy McCormick, and Clayton Ivey. He had Mac McAnally on acoustic guitar that day. He had Duncan Cameron at second electric in case I screwed up. He had Lenny LeBlanc and Robert Byrne and Eddie Struzek to sing backgrounds. What do you think about that? I mean, I just put that together to demo a couple of tunes of mine. I just done a record in LA for Bonnie, and the producer had done about 50 takes of everything and used the first 2 bars of take 19 with the next 4 bars, and there was like a pile 2 feet high, a 2-inch tape on the floor. And here I come down to Muscle Shoals, and we just sort of look at this little number chart and run it down. And Jimmy said, well, it doesn't cost any extra to hit a red light. And so we just run through the chart once. We played it once. At the end, he said, any confessions? And I turned to David Hood and I went, you guys keep first takes around here? And he goes, all the time. So I went back to LA. I gave everybody notice. I said, I'm moving to Alabama. Someone went, you're crazy. You've just done this and da-da-da-da-da. I said, no, man, I'm moving to the place where they keep first takes. And I got down here, and he graciously drew me in to the section. Without Jimmy Johnson, I'd have never played with Ed James or Steve Winwood or any, just the list is so long. You know, I've officiated funerals before, and in general, you have to work on coming up with something to say about the guy. This one's about, what do you leave out? He's left this incredible wake. Steve Nathan's here. We used to work a lot together, and he worked for Jimmy, and he posted Jimmy's discography on Facebook the other day. He goes, to all of us who think we've had a pretty good career, and we have, but check this out. And I started scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and the little thing on the side of my phone was going about that fast. And it was just going down so slowly, it just kept going. And it wasn't just B-sides. It was the soundtrack of our lives. Every song you heard while the pictures were going on today, it's the soundtrack of our lives. He was that influential. What a wake. I moved here in 1980, raised my family here. I could do a Johnny Taylor session that afternoon and be an assistant Little League coach that evening. I had a life here. I got brought in here. I have my dearest life friends here, and Jimmy was one of the biggest mentors in my life. He taught me how to get things on tape. I thought I knew something. but he'd say, here, thin pick on this one. Switch guitars, front pick. He just showed me how to get things on tape. I would not be who I am, and most of us would not be who we are in here without Jimmy Johnson. I mentioned David Hood. David would love to be here. David's waited 3 months for the appointment he had planned today for a surgical procedure. He just texted me and said the operation went fine. If he had missed it, he'd have been in terrible back pain again for the next year. And he said, I think Jimmy will give me a pass. I'm going to read something that David asked me to say. Would you say a few words for me? Jimmy Johnson was more than just a friend. We met in the 7th grade at Atlanta Avenue School in Sheffield. When Jimmy started his band, the Dill Rays, I was one of the kids standing and watching everything they did. Jimmy Croney, their bass player, let me take his P bass so I could learn Walk, Don't Run. Man, I remember learning Walk, Don't Run, and I didn't have a whammy bar, and I didn't know how they did it. It was the first bass I ever touched. Johnson encouraged me from the very first of my career. He was my mentor, my conscience, my guide, my partner, and my brother for life. And there's a big hole in my world, but he'll always live in my heart. I hate not being here today with all of our friends, but it took 3 months to schedule this, and I know JJ will give me a pass. Right after he sent me this, he sent me something Roger had sent him. And I hadn't spoken to Roger in a while. Right after I got this text, Roger called me on the phone and asked me if I would send his regards here as well. He was the most animated I've talked to him in years. Powerful. Hated that he couldn't be here. Hoped nobody felt mad at him for not being here. I said, I think Jimmy will give you a pass. I'm quoting one of your friends. I worked for Roger a lot too. He wouldn't let me get by with stuff. Jimmy didn't either. They referred to it as no truth in that. I'd just be slipping things in and flying by and they go, wait, no truth in that. It's a very high bar. That's a very high bar. Roger started getting animated. He said, Will, I met him when we were teenagers. We just wanted to get into music. We love music. We started talking music. We started going out to our car, and believe it or not, as teenagers, we fantasized starting our own recording studio. He said we would build fantasy studios sitting there talking in our car. This is Roger telling me this yesterday, in a real animated way. And then he goes, and I remember the day we picked up the note on Fred Beavis's place, that you all now know as 3614 Jackson Highway. So I remember we picked up the note. He goes, it was me and Jimmy, Roger. It was Roger and Jimmy. And we called Jerry Wexler and asked if he could maybe help us give salaries to Dave and Barry. He goes, and we gave him salaries for a little while, but then we just made them partners. And Roger goes, hey, it was David and Barry. And what those 4 guys did, they caught lightning in a bottle. They caught lightning in a bottle. They changed everything. They changed the way we think about it. Here in these last several years after the documentary and after different things have gone out there, I realized at one point why it's maybe taken the big bad world out there a while to figure out what's going on down here. And it's because when you listen to Motown, you go, well, that's Motown. When you listen to Stax Bolt, you go, well, that's Stax Bolt, Memphis. You know what I'm saying? But when you realize that I'll take you there, and take a letter Maria, and Torn Between Two Lovers, and old time rock and roll, and Kodachrome are all the exact same band just about. How versatile is this place? How powerful. I'm looking out here and I'm seeing people who've played all over the world, Spooner and Middleton. It's a powerful thing to talk about your friend that you adore. I love Jimmy. Jimmy called me on the phone and wanted to check on me and make sure I was all right. And he showed me things, and he taught me things, and he took me under his wing. And so, in this last week, especially after Donnie, which was a serious blow as well, it left a hole in our hearts, and I just immediately called Jimmy, and I said, Jimmy, I just got to see you. Well, I actually got Becky, and she said, well, we're going to doctors this week, but next Tuesday at 3. And so I had it on my calendar next Tuesday at 3. And so next Tuesday at 3, no, actually Monday at 3, she called me and said, I have to take him to the hospital. And so I said, can I keep my appointment? She was like, totally cool. And so I went the next day, and Jimmy was just immediately there with me. And I'm saying this because I need to process as well. And I looked him right in the eye, and he put his hand out like this. And he was already starting to go into a space. He had his hand in the air, and it was like that when he saw me in the door. He went like this. And I came over and I took his hand, and Becky said, you know who that is? He went, it's Will. And we sat down and put my hand on his head, and I kissed him, and we just talked for about 45 minutes, and he was totally lucid and totally with, and terribly upset that Donnie passed. We started talking his favorite movies, and then we started talking about the movies Donnie was in, and him getting hit in the head with that skillet. He'd be the head of our Alfredo Garcia. And, you know, for a while, you know, I was wondering why Kelvin Holly. I don't think I've ever even heard Kelvin called Donnie Donnie. He was always Skillet. And we just talked movies and guitar and music, and nobody loved music more than Jimmy Johnson. He taught me how to listen to music. You know, a lot of us just hear a song, it just comes on. But he's like, you hear that? You hear that? You hear that? Hear what he did there? Hear what the hi-hat did? He dissected things. He would sit me down. And every time he sat me down, thankfully, he came around behind and gave me a little bit of a neck rub. I tried it on him. It's very difficult. He was really, but he came and put me on the floor a couple of times. And he would make me listen. He and Roger always said, good players are good listeners, Will. You got to listen. You have to listen. And Jimmy listened. He heard things. He heard things a lot of us don't hear. It's what made him a great producer. It's why there's so many people in this room, young musicians, older musicians, where Jimmy looked you right in the eye and said, I believe in you. Come on, be part. I believe in you. How many people heard that from Jimmy? That he said, I believe in you. Do it. I heard a testimony about a young woman that sat down. He said, what do you want out of life? And she goes, I want to be a star. He said, okay, you're a star. Now what are you going to do? He just provoked us to greatness. And he was so incredibly unassuming, really. That was amazing. I remember when he got this guitar, that Fred Gretsch saw the documentary and saw him playing a Gretsch and called him up, cold called him and said, are you Jimmy Johnson, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section? And he goes, well, yeah, I am. He goes, well, I'm Fred Gretsch. And he goes, I thought you played a Telecaster, but I see you in that documentary with a Gretsch. You still have it? And Jimmy goes, no, I hate to tell you, it got stolen back in the 70s, and I still regret it. And the next day at 10:30, FedEx had this at his house. And Jimmy called me right on the phone, and he said, man, I just got something in the mail. I don't think I'm worthy of it. Would you come over here and play it and tell me if it's any good? I went, yeah, it's good. It's good. Excuse me for a minute. And you know, after our conversation, he started to close his eyes. And I said, I'm going to let you rest, Jimmy. I have to be in Nashville tomorrow, but I'll be back Thursday. And I just took my time Thursday. And I was walking in the building, and my phone buzzed, and it was Clayton Ivey saying Jimmy passed. And I went, no! I was in the lobby of the hospital, and I just couldn't believe it. And I ran up the stairs, and I came out, and I walked down the hall. I saw Sandy first, and I knew it. And I walked out, and the door was open, and I caught Jay's eye. And we just dissolved. Went in there, and I sat down next to him, and I was just totally unemotionally prepared for it. And they started telling me about his last little while. And Jimmy was starting to drift. He started to just, give it up. You know, a lot of men don't want to die in front of their wives. You know, it's true. A lot of times a wife sits right next to them all these hours, finally goes, I just got to take a 5-minute break. And that's what goes, and then they feel guilty that they weren't there. And I don't want you to even think that for a second. Jimmy's a good man. He let go when he let go. You know, you were down the hall. She wasn't down the hall 5 minutes, but Jimmy had just gone like this. And he went, Jesus, and passed. You can put that in a theological pipe however you want. What a beautiful vision. To be caught up in a moment of peace, in a moment of knowing. And it makes it so much easier for me to stand here today and know that we are absolutely all going to see this man again. Brad Ewan, who also worked with Jimmy, I know you all know. We all know each other. We're all hugging each other. Did you tell the roar in this room? That says a lot about a man, too. Look at his friends. Look at you. Amazing, delightful people here. And the roar in here, that's life. That's a deep thing. There are a lot of funerals you walk into, and they're nervously quiet. But this place rocked with love and fellowship. It's a powerful thing. We have something here. We have something very powerful here. It's a God thing. It's a real God thing. And Brad had just posted that in his heartbrokenness, he walked outside, and I don't know if you happen to see that orange half moon this week. It was so powerful, it was so close to earth, it looked bigger than usual. And it was out there, and Brad said he looked up at the sky, and he said, that's about how I feel. I feel like I'm just half right now. And that voice, he said it was a voice that he knew it wasn't his voice, but it was a deep, strong, still small, but strong, deep voice that just said very clearly to him, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And just because you can't see him now doesn't mean he's not there. That's a powerful thing. You know that whole mood is there. You can only see that much of it. And I just wanted to spread that around. I wanted to honor my dear friend who asked me to perform the ceremony with him and Becky. I married him. And then I got to marry Jay and Sandy. It's amazing when you get to go multi-generational. We're in each other's lives. The moment Jimmy passed, I started calling all my friends. I love you. I'm not going to let another second go by without it. And that's where we need to exist. You can't always exist in this deep, struggling with our mortal view. When I have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. And it gives us pause today. But I really encourage you guys to just carry this torch, to leave awake. Jimmy left us awake. We're all still surfing on it. It makes water skiing way more fun when the boat has a cool wake. And Jimmy left awake, and it's expanded, and it goes into all sorts of places. When David and I were driving down to see Donnie the day he passed, which was a powerful day as well, the radio came on, and David had it on an old R&B kind of a thing in Sirius Radio. I don't get it. And it was amazing how many songs came on that Jimmy was on. Just amazing. And I just thought, we are in rare air here in this town to love one another, to get to be around one another, to get to carry on the legacy here. And we need to carry on the legacy here. It's an important thing. You've got a whole nother generation coming up. Our kids know each other. I gave Patterson Hood guitar lessons when he was 16. They keep going. It keeps going down, and you keep passing it forward. You keep being generous, and you keep opening your doors, and you let young folks come in. You know, Jackson Nance down here, you know, who I guess I first played with when you were 12. I got here when I was 28 years old, and I'm now getting, you know, Social Security and Medicare. Yeah, that laughter was deep because that's where we are. Look at all the gray, would-be gray ponytails in this room. If we kept our ponytails. You know, that's where we are. And that's what Jimmy would want. Jimmy wants us to be musical and creative, and he wants us to continue the legacy that he's continued here. He grew up here. This is his root. and now we're all just branches of this tree. And I don't have much else to say, but I really wanted to just honor my dear friend. He's one of a kind. There was nobody else I've ever met in this whole world like Jimmy Johnson. And I know you haven't either. He attracted this eclectic, diverse crowd. And so many more. Who's like Jimmy? And we're all like that. Every one of us. Not two of us have the same fingerprints. Every person in here has a gift, has something powerful to share with the person sitting right next to you and everybody else. And I really encourage you not to even leave this building today without grabbing a neck. Break back through. It's really hard when you haven't seen somebody in a while. You know, I let it go months and I don't talk to Roger Hawkins, and all of a sudden it gets harder to call because it's been so long. And we play these little games in our head, and I say, just break through them. Like Jimmy does, he just breaks through. Calls you on the phone. I loved it when I looked down and it'd be JJ on my caller ID. And wow! It would lift my soul. I wouldn't even know what he was going to say. It wouldn't matter. He could yell at me. He did yell at me a couple of times in those early days, man. I mean, he let me have it. And then he would go, as I said, he would switch. He'd go, at one point, some piece of equipment I didn't have, or I brought to the studio, something in my pedal board didn't work. You guys have got to stop thinking you can just come in here with your, on together, bam, 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 bam. And that was the day. He goes, by the way, do you hear that solo you just put on solo? Here, come into my office. And I go, gosh, he's yelling at me. And then he's my closest bud. And that was just the standard, that's all. And you had to know that. And so I just encourage you to let that influence live through us. Let's do it. Let's finish well. Let's finish well. This is such an absolutely divisive, vitriolically divisive era right now. I really encourage you, as much as it's within your ability, live at peace with everybody. Stop throwing gasoline on your best friend's Facebook fires. Come on. It's like people that I love. I can look out here and I see both sides of the aisle. You know what I mean? And so he puts something that's pro this, and so he puts something that's pro that, and all of a sudden people that love each other say things to each other on the internet that they wouldn't say to each other's faces at all. And I'm saying, let's make it real. Let's make it real. No way I would let my politics separate me from anybody in this room. And that's just the way it is. And Jimmy was the same way. He just said what he believed, but if you believe something different, well, that's just what you believe. You're my friend. You're my friend for life. And I felt that with Jimmy. And you're all here today because you felt it too. You felt it. You felt Jimmy's love. And he was a good man. Jimmy brought us into his life and made us better. Do you have anything? There just may be a couple of people that need to say something. That's quiet.
Amen. Amen to what you've said.
You want to say something?
Yeah.
Speaking of an eclectic crowd, I think this guy is the voice of America in Africa. Am I right?
I don't know if I can go through this. I have known personally Jimmy for 30 years. I was always promised to come and visit, and every time we talk on the phone, it was a very enriching experience. Jimmy was so knowledgeable about everything, and he was generous with his time, his knowledge, he would share it. And I discovered Muscle Shoals while I was a young broadcaster in Senegal, West Africa. We were getting the music from France, I started playing it on the radio, and people were blown away by the music. They never heard anything like that. Basically, it was a music that was talking to us because it originated from Africa. And it went through a transformation here in America with your own culture. Everything was a plan. And we felt it, we lived it, and we loved it. And I started reading about it, and that's how I discovered the name Jimmy Johnson. And I said, I have to meet this man. I have to go to muscle shows. I was offered the possibility to go and work in another country. I said, no, I have to go to America. And when the opportunity came, I seized it. And when I called him, he said, come on. I spent the time with him. Susan Harris was the secretary then. He let me in. I was supposed to go to another interview, but I spent the time with him. The rest of my stay here in muscle shows. He was so knowledgeable. He goes into details, into things you never imagined. It was a very enriching experience, and I stayed in touch with him. And every time he comes to Washington, we'll be together. And I loved him dearly. And the history of muscle shoals, everything that happened here, the history, we were very frank about what was going on in America during that time. And seeing him and these black players, these black musicians, having a guy like Jerry Wexler, a Jewish guy, Ahmet Ertegun, a guy from Turkey originally, and seeing all these people working together just for the love of music and producing something that will live forever was rather amazing. And meeting a guy who was in the middle of it was equally important, and seeing him as a friend, as a brother, who was also something I will never forget. I promised to come to see him while he was alive. When I heard he done it, it broke my heart. So long, Jimmy.
Amazing. Yeah, let's just spend a few minutes here and listen to another word. Is Jay coming up? You coming up here? I was waiting for you. I thought you were going through the door.
I was just giving the dresser a hug, but I guess I'm on the spot.